All right. So tonight we have a little topic for you. This is a Weird Wednesday.
Damn it, I was drinking. Woo!
Well, hey there, and thanks for stopping in to Night Shift Video. My name is James, and tonight I am joined by this guy over here.
You got Cody.
Oh, you did a little something different.
I know. Sorry.
I think you did. You got Cody like back in the day. I think that's like a throwback.
Maybe. This is my spring forward address.
Oh,
I'm just saying. I've had a weird day, not a bad day, just a weird day. Weird couple days. So.
I felt today. So the older I get,
Oh yeah, bring it, brother.
the more daylight savings time has an effect.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's hands down for sure.
Yeah.
And I realized today it's not always the day of, but like the next day.
Oh yeah.
That first Monday.
So yesterday for me, like I have a 16-month-old son, and he experienced it pretty much right away, and it was like, okay, but it's almost like he didn't get enough sleep. We had to wake him up. Like that's the personality he's given us. Certainly not a terror, just like a little extra fussy, a little extra kind of sleepy. But yesterday, dude, I seriously drank like 2 beers Saturday night as I'm like watching Frasier with my family. For those who don't know what Frasier is, it's Frasier. It's my favorite TV show.
Oh yeah.
And went to bed at what I would consider a somewhat reasonable time.
Sure.
Especially for like a time change night. Like, 11:30, midnight. Like, at max, that counts as what, 1 at max? Oh my God, dude. You would have thought that I had a kegger the night before.
Yeah.
Like, all day is just in a fog. And today, like, it was just like, everything's off. Like, I'm not hungry at lunchtime. And my dad was the first to notice. He was like, you okay? I was like, I don't know. And I turned 30 in a week and a half. He's like, "Oh yeah, that's getting old." Yep. I was like, I just looked at him. He was like, "That's what it is." This is my wisdom that I now impart to you. It's like, God, no.
Welcome.
I'm mad.
So Cody and I are both joining the 30 Club this year.
Woo!
Him a little bit before me, but it's still impending doom is on the way.
Oh no, I love it. My kids asked me today, and I was like, no, this is one step closer to my prime. So I have a theory. This is way off topic. I have a theory that you get to choose your own prime.
Yep.
By the ripe age of 92, my grandpa was shoveling the old people's driveway across the street, which they were like 20 years his junior. But he was in, I wouldn't say perfect shape, but he was in pretty decent shape. He was far better than those guys over there. And so I just, at that moment, realized age is a mindset. I've chosen that my prime is going to be 55. It's going to last exactly 8 years until I am 63. And in which case, then after that, I retire and kiss my ass goodbye.
No, maybe there's just different primes. I think that I'm in a prime now.
You think you are?
I think I am.
Okay.
I feel like I'm just doing a lot of stuff that I like to be doing.
It's like pre-prime.
Maybe.
This is the tenderizing moment.
And then I get to be a prime grandpa. And like, that's fine.
There you go.
Like, but I'm pretty happy right now.
You can call this your prime.
But I also feel like my body's falling apart.
Oh, yeah. Hence back to the time change thing. It's like, yeah, this sucks.
All right. So tonight we have a little topic for you. This is a Weird Wednesday.
Damn it, I was drinking. Woo!
Tonight we're going to be talking about the Riddle House.
Dun, dun, dun.
It's a famous haunted house in Florida.
Yikes. Every house, in my opinion, is haunted in Florida.
Woo.
Just because Florida man, but different topic.
Haunted by a living cryptid called Florida Man. So we're going to... A lot of what I have for us tonight is from mysteriousuniverse.org, which is a really great website just to kind of archive a lot of this weird shit that we talk about.
Yeah, it was really interesting. So you sent me the topic, and I started doing like a little digging, and first link that always comes up is Wikipedia,
Of course.
and typically I give it a run, and then like fill in the gaps from there. But like typically, especially on stuff that's like little bit of hearsay or this was charted once somewhere. they do a pretty good job of revealing that stuff.
Yeah.
Wikipedia page for this sucked.
Yeah. Well, I would say just in general, this is the first kind of like famous American haunted house that we've done as a Weird Wednesday.
Sure.
And I think that most of those, there's more info in like the touristy trap version of it.
Yeah, that's a good.
Rather than the actual story. And so this story as a story might not be that cool.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a thing. And I want to do ghost stories and haunted house stories.
Oh, yeah.
And so this was one that I found. I was like, this is one we're going to do.
It's a very interesting one.
Yeah. So the history of Riddle House goes back to 1905 when it was commissioned and built by a hotel owner named Henry Flagler.
That's also how I pronounce it in my mind.
It's a hard name to say.
Yeah, it is.
Flagler.
Flagler.
In West Palm Beach, Florida. It is situated across from Woodlawn Cemetery, or at least it was at the time. We'll get into that later. And it originally served as a mortuary and funeral parlor.
Yeah.
So it's already creepy, right?
Already creepy. I think we've talked about like cemetery stories before.
Yes.
And we'll go back. If you're a first time listener, I'll tell you, I think cemeteries are very peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've been in one that kind of gave me the heebie-jeebies. You could feel the unrest, but my college dorm, literally my room was on the corner of our president's house and a cemetery. And I would walk back there all the time. I think it's extremely peaceful. So a lot of times people say like, oh, cemetery. And like, I don't have that connotation. However, mortuary, that's just scary. There's so many dead people in there.
Yeah.
Like, and if you believe that spirits can, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, get trapped or choose to stay or are at unrest, like, I feel like that's like the first place they're gonna hang out, right? And like
it was the last place they were.
Yeah, and my uncle's,
depending on how you see it,
my uncle by marriage, so he's not like blood uncle.
Mm-hmm.
My uncle's brother has a funeral home, and like my cousins like used to do like pickups and like
I had family members and a really good friend who same business, same line of work.
And it's like
they're all still in it today.
And like props to them because I feel like most of them, they treat the families with such respect. They treat the bodies with such respect that like I feel like most of the time that's the only thing that puts me at ease is like, why would somebody want to haunt these people? They're so nice, really taking care of them. But like I don't know, man. It's still to me, it's scary as crap.
So the cemetery across the street is a very well-known, beautiful, big cemetery. It's even like recognized by a lot of paranormal investigators as a place that has a lot of activity. People go there a lot and pick up EVPs and all kinds of stuff. Even in the cemetery across the street from where this house was originally located.
Okay.
It also, because it was kind of like a bougie cemetery, is where a lot of rich people were buried.
Oh.
And especially at the time, they were usually buried with heirlooms, jewelry, fancy things. So it became a hotbed for grave robbers.
Yikes.
And after kind of dealing with that for a while, they ended up turning the house into what they called the gatekeeper's cottage.
I know. How cool is that nickname?
It's a pretty cool name.
Oh.
Pretty cool name. And so basically the caregivers of the graveyard would live there. This is a very common thing, even in very, very small town cemeteries. So in Winchester, Indiana, there is basically one big cemetery for the entire city. And there was a guy, I don't know his actual name. My dad was friends with him, and we always just called him Gravedigger. I don't know his actual name. I think it might have been Dave.
Dave the Gravedigger.
He lived on the premises at the cemetery in this little tiny house and kind of was everything. He was the maintenance guy. He dug graves. He kind of helped with upkeep if like things were in disarray. And he was also security. Like if kids were out there or drunk people were out there, like causing a ruckus, people go and piss on their math teacher's grave, something, stupid like that. Yep. Small town. This kind of shit happens.
You had to call out the teachers, but that's okay. Yeah.
Well, I'm just
Solidarity.
no
teachers.
one who's still living in Winchester went to college or anything. So probably the only person they held a grudge against was like that one teacher in high school.
Yep. Yep. Sounds about right.
And so yeah, this is the thing. My dad would actually go to a regular poker night once a month at Gravedigger's house.
Stop it.
Him and a bunch of his buddies all play poker at the cemetery.
Dude, that is the making of an 80s horror movie.
Isn't it awesome though?
Yes, absolutely.
So this is a pretty common thing, and then the caregivers would live there, and then also it was just sort of a base of operations for the night guards when they're walking, doing their patrols, things like that. So obviously, starting as a funeral home and a mortuary, it already kind of had a spooky thing going on. And then people, of course, started spreading the rumor that maybe not, it was built upon an Indian burial ground. Classic American ghost story fodder. Fun fact, depending on how you look at it, most of our city is built on an Indian burial ground.
You can't.
This entire town is
Eastern Seaboard, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting
no.
Indian burial ground, native burial ground, whatever you want to call it. Like, yeah, they're everywhere.
Yep. And so there's that, and so it already kind of has a bit of ominous air to it. And then things get a little bit worse in the 1920s.
Yeah.
There was one of the security guards. He was working at the house, and he's a man that he went by Buck. He was allegedly brutally murdered on the premises and probably killed by some grave robbers that he ran into contact with and was trying to bust.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I did not come across that story.
Oh, yes. I love it when there's more than one, because you knew that some kind of death thing was going to happen, and it is going to happen. We're going to get to it. But this also happened.
That's interesting.
So after that, depending on the story, it was either grave robbers or someone who was visiting the cemetery that he got in like an altercation with. Again, maybe it was a confused mourning relative of someone buried there. Maybe they had a little bit too much to drink. And
I was gonna say, like, odds are, if the altercation leads to that, it doesn't exactly have like a nice, innocent place.
Oh, right. So there's that, and then after that is whenever kind of people started saying that they would see some things around the house and the graveyard. And they would see old Buck still doing his patrols.
Yeah.
That's
kind of the first. So there's I don't want to get ahead of myself, but like, I feel like especially for a town with like, I don't know, like, again, I'm not from West Palm Beach during the 20s. I would imagine like these people become staples. And so like, how commonplace would it just to write it off like as like, oh, that's old Buck, like before your brain really kicked in, like, oh crap, that's old Buck, like, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, you go 10, I don't know, 15 years, 20 years, like whatever, seeing this person do this thing, and it's so commonplace that you're that's your daily routine, and then all of a sudden, like, he's still carrying on his daily routine. Yikes.
So a little bit more time passes. We're in kind of the mid-20s here, and the house gets purchased by Carl Riddle, which is where we get the Riddle House name. He was the city manager and superintendent of West Palm Beach City Incorporation.
Of course he was. He was everything.
Yeah, And so he buys the what was it called? Gatekeeper's Cottage. He buys the Gatekeeper's Cottage to use as a personal residence. And so he lives there. And, all's fine and dandy, except even back then, Carl didn't necessarily have a great time while owning the house. Says that he reportedly experienced a wide variety of phenomena at the residence. At the same time, he also had to deal with one of his employees' onset of deep depression due to his financial troubles. I found another source that said that this guy who worked for Carl Riddle was accused of maybe stealing some money from the Riddles. And he wasn't like getting fired, but it was like this thing where like this money was missing. We all knew that he was having some issues, and it was probably him, but he was claiming that it wasn't. Whether it was, whether it was not, he ended up hanging himself in the house.
Yep.
Yeah. Not a good thing.
Not a good thing. So I think I talked about this before. I grew up with a buddy who had a haunted house.
Yep.
And so when I read that, actually, my buddy's house was haunted. It was creepy. I don't know if it was haunted. Everybody in the area thought it was haunted.
Sure.
I don't know. I'd never had firsthand account. If I did, I would have never set foot again in the house.
Right.
But it was because of a hanging. And you know, if you really talk to, well, what I've found, this is just personal. I certainly don't want to claim this as like, this is fact. I've talked to all these like paranormal experts, but like people who I've talked to who have experienced paranormal, it seems to be from this kind of act. Like,
Sure.
I don't know if there is such unrest in this act. I certainly don't want to get into each available opportunity to take your life, every means to take your life, but there seems to be like some arrest behind this act because one of my buddies, he ended up marrying this chick who had a haunted house in our area, and like that was it. And it was very like, it has been on shows and it has been documented, and they have found spiritual forces.
And you know, and maybe it was maybe that's also a product of the time as well. I mean, I'm you know, even in the 20s, I'm sure a lot of people still had guns, but like just that may not have really been seen as like the go-to option.
Sure.
I think even as a child in the 90s, like my first realization of like what suicide was and what it meant for someone to kill themselves was tied to hanging themselves. Like,
interesting.
Like when you watch movies and stuff, and like you see somebody and they like take the belt and they're like wrapping it up, and then like they jump off a table or something, and you're like, oh, what's happening? And it's like, oh, you committed suicide. And it's like, I think early on for me, even in pop culture, like that's committing suicide is hanging yourself, and then like now you can do all kinds of things. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe a product at the time. Maybe that was just we in oh shit, what's his name? Maxwell. Forget his first name. Nope. Gladwell?
Maybe.
Malcolm Gladwell?
Malcolm Gladwell?
The guy who wrote that book? Tipping Point? Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And they do a whole discussion about suicides in other countries, and I think it was like Indonesia or Malaysia, something like that, and how like there are these things in sociology called permission givers, and like once they do it, like you could see it as a viable option. Maybe at the time there wasn't a lot of people purposefully shooting themselves, so like nobody saw it as a viable option until, you know, obviously that imagery is very in the public mindset these days, but
for sure,
maybe at the time it wasn't. Anyway, so after this suicide, the paranormal activity worsened in the house. Many family members and housekeepers alike claimed to see the apparition of the dead employee, as well as lesser-defined shadow shapes and reports of moving objects, flickering lights, and sounds like chains being dragged across the floor of the attic. Also, disembodied whisperings were not uncommon. Indeed, this was enough to make many of the staff quit, and it got to the point where the beleaguered Riddle family could bear it no more, and they moved out as well.
So real quick, just to like throw in another nugget or clarifier.
Yeah.
Because maybe you mentioned it, maybe not. The help committed suicide in the attic.
Yes.
And so like I feel like a lot of things kind of keep tying back to that space.
It's good. Yeah.
And that's why a lot of these, like even later on when construction crews are in there, well, a couple decades later, things keep ending up in the attic. And like, you know, like all of these spiritual forces keep driving to that space.
Yeah. So what ended up happening is the house kind of like shifts hands a lot in this time after the Riddles owned it. Let's see. I had a couple things in here of it was used as a dormitory for Palm Beach Atlantic College at one point. It was used as a county hospital, tuberculosis ward, a relief hub for a mental asylum, a store, here and there just as a residence. This thing's got a history.
I do not want to hear these walls talk.
And then, allegedly being soon abandoned once again due to reported intense ghostly activity in and around the property. In the 1980s, it was there unused, slowly deteriorating into a feral state, and they were gonna just tear the place down.
Yep.
When Carl Riddle's nephew,
Here it is.
John Riddle,
John.
which I was able to find a couple videos with interviews of John.
Really?
Yeah, which were pretty cool because this house has been on a couple different ghost shows, and most of the time, whenever they did a televised event, it was still technically owned by John, and they were able to interview him and everything. And yeah, so like the Ghost Adventures episode, and then there was another one I watched called I think Hope for Paranormal or something like that. It was a little. It wasn't like as big of a show. It was like a YouTube show.
Oh, okay.
But honestly, in my opinion, well, here you go, guys. If you didn't know this, we are not big fans of Ghost Adventures and Zach Baggins on this show. I think that most of what they do is full of baloney.
Yep.
And I also kind of hate the like tough guy Ed Hardy Monster Energy drink persona that he puts on when he's yelling at ghosts. Even if any of it was real, I don't think that's helping or helpful at all.
No, yeah, absolutely.
Come out here, bitch, do something. Like what? Like, this is just odd. I don't like watching it.
If I was a ghost, I would ignore you too.
Or kick your balls. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know.
That's gonna validate what you're doing.
That's true.
No,
That's true. You don't get it. You don't get it.
it's gonna tickle you right in the back. So you keep claiming it, nobody believes you.
Which I actually want to do a little bit more of a deeper dive on old Baggins boy sometime because of what's it called, the Devil House or the Demon House, his documentary, which was a house in Indiana. I'd like to get into that at some point, even though I don't want to, because that means I have to watch a thing that he's made, and I don't love the idea of giving him more money. But whatever. So this house is featured on that show. So John Riddle, yeah. Do you have any specific instances? I have some that I can find through the article real quick. But do you have anything that you recollect? So they're moving the house from its original location to this kind of like refuge for landmark buildings in West Palm Beach. I forget what they called it. It's like Yesteryear Village or something like that.
Yes, that's it.
Yep.
So what I think is really interesting is like I read, and again, I'm certainly not an expert on this. I found a couple articles, and some different, and like the older I get, the more I realize like anybody can't give an interview or have a microphone put in their face, and it's like, okay, is that really the tide sentiment? Some people were, hey, this is a historic home and it has a lot of history to our city. Some people are, hey, trying to bring rest to this house. I think especially if you talk to people who are, into these old houses that like maybe the house itself has a character, like we can bring that rest. What's interesting about this story is it's like the characters within the house, not necessarily the house itself, which again, you're getting into kind of the fringe of conversation. But
we've got a little bit about, I'm going to wrap this episode with a rundown of what's traditionally accepted as the different types of hauntings.
Oh,
so
okay.
If
Perfect.
you're wondering if we're going to get to that, we will.
Perfect. Okay. So I'll leave that there. I think the most interesting to me is the kind of the stories from the construction workers, where they're finding, and it's not always super malicious, but it's going to be tools found in these places or work that they did was undone. And I feel like when you think about people who want to kind of add drama to the story, typically, and I've worked blue collar jobs. Most of the time it's not those individuals. Like they're going to blame it on the guy who's the apprentice. They're going to blame it on, hell, they'll blame it literally on anything before they say it was a ghost. I've worked in factories. I've worked in factories. I've worked for landscaping. I've worked for demolition construction. Like, and these guys, they're just like, they are put your head down, make money for your family, get through life, and like live for the weekend. And there's so many stories. I don't know. So
many little stories.
Just little things. And again, most of
hammers
them,
in the wrong place, ladders being moved. Like just little things.
And it's not like a malicious intent as far as I want to damage you. It's more like I want you to stop or cease or mess with you.
It seems like something was not a fan of this house being torn down.
Yeah.
And obviously it wasn't being demolished. It was being torn down with care to then be rebuilt in another location.
Yeah.
But this, if there is some sort of entity, probably couldn't have even understood that. Or maybe it did understand that. It's like, no, I'm not
Stop
moving.
it.
Like,
Yeah.
either way, like, it doesn't want these pieces falling.
Yeah. Well, and then what's interesting is, you know, I don't know how these things work, but they went with the house, like,
Yeah.
and like, not to spoil anything, like they like it.
No, you're good.
It's living in the woodwork. It's living in the walls.
Yep.
We're like, I mean, like they get there, they piece it back together, and it's whatever entities are there are still present.
Yeah, visitors have reported having objects thrown at them, seeing the apparition of an aggressive, angry woman in the kitchen who smashes things and slaps men, another apparition of a young boy, and of course that of the Riddle employee who killed himself, often seen hanging from the rafters just as he was the day that he died.
What I think is interesting is like could we ever know all of the stories in this house? Like,
Right.
certainly not.
That's the thing. We don't have a record of an angry, wife who lived here and slapped her husband, or maybe husband stepped out or whatever, and like she has a thing against men. We don't have any record of that happening. But especially all these stories of what this building was used for at different times, like there are so many things that could have happened.
It's a part of an asylum. Like whatever spirit is still there believes that this is happening. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't. I don't know. If you have imagination enough to think that this is happening or this could have happened, then it doesn't take real far to think. Yeah, absolutely. All of this could be truth.
Yeah, so going through here, so it did appear on Travel Channel's Ghost Adventures with host Zach Baggins, during which the crew reported doors slamming on their own, anomalous noises like bells ringing and footsteps, and some other strange phenomena. There was an instance in which an American flag was knocked over with no apparent cause. A bird cage, not a bird case. Big old case for birds.
Case them up.
A bird cage flew off of a shelf, and they had frequently felt some cold spots. And there are recordings of what sounds like a disembodied child's voice in the children's room. It has been noted that the activity in the house likely seems to become much more potent and malicious after the move to Yesteryear Village than it ever had been before, almost as if the spirits are angry and they want to go back. So, I didn't have, and I'm not even going to consider this any kind of like gospel or encyclopedic knowledge of types of hauntings.
Sure.
I just wanted to give us kind of a primer so we could have an idea of what most people who really believe that these events are occurring, what they think they are, and the different kinds that they could be, and maybe we could kind of determine what maybe we think could be happening here if all these accounts are true. So there are a few different examples here. I'll go with probably the most well-known first, which would be a poltergeist.
Okay.
So obviously we know this from movies, the Poltergeist series, but a poltergeist is from a German word meaning noisy spirits. Reports of poltergeists date well back into ancient Roman times. The activity that takes place will start off with knocks and bangs, furniture moving around by itself, and then it may become more intense, manifesting itself through voices and even the appearance of full apparitions. Furniture may slide across the room and beds may shake. Many shows are based upon this type of haunting because it tends to be the most terrifying, but also the most rarest type of haunting that occurs. Many times with a poltergeist case, they will disappear without any warning, just as they appeared. Certain times it may stop within a few days. Other times may take a few years. You may never know the reason that it happened. Most people are happy just to see it go, and that's enough for them. But understanding why it was there in the first place can bring you to understand how to keep it from coming back again. In this case, knowledge is always key to protecting yourself. So the idea here is the majority of the time, poltergeists are experienced by several people, and they will usually center around one person in the group. So like the whole family's experiencing something, but they center around one person. we see this in movies all the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's always centered around a person. Many times, a young girl, and it says in this, young females tend to be the center of the attention of this type of entity for whatever reason.
Sure.
And then usually it kind of attaches itself in a way to that person's emotions, and they may or may not be like kind of egging it on, I guess, without even meaning to.
Absolutely.
And so that's, obviously many females in teenage years, that's an emotional state for all genders, but like it's a trope for a reason. Yeah. And so that seems to be why examples tend to kind of center around that.
Yeah.
So that's a poltergeist. And then we have, obviously, demonic activity.
Right.
So this can be a lot of different things. This says that demons are entities that have never existed as a mortal human form, where a poltergeist would be something that was human at one point.
Okay.
So these are kind of, completely different. They could be horrific, evil-looking. Some people say they've seen demons and they're incredibly hideous to look at. The person who's writing this guide says they believe that demons do this for a scare effect. They know that what we fear, and this is not their true appearance. A lot of times they're followed by black mist, black fog, black smoke. Most demonic hauntings, the occupants claim to be followed by one of these types of things. That's funny. I thought that I messed up. They just wrote the same thing twice. Horrific, evil-looking. Some people claim. Exact same thing.
Boom.
So these creatures are very strong, unlike human spirits, which are not very strong. The poltergeists are not that strong. It takes a lot of energy for them to do this. That's why they're feeding off the energy and emotions of someone else, because they can use that to move things around and slam doors shut and all this kind of things. Demonic creatures, on the other hand, are very strong, and they don't mind showing it. There have been cases where people have been thrown through the air and even attacked. Apparently, their main goal is to break down a person's free will in order to make a way for possession. So there's plenty of other things we can get into there, but that's the basic idea.
Sure.
Then there are intelligent or interactive activities. And so this goes back to Einstein's theory. As matter beings, we are all energy on the quantum level. We are made up of atoms and neutrons. As matter energy beings, we have intelligence. While we live, we have an energy aura that surrounds our living bodies. This aura is created by millions of electrical currents that arc through our bodies. Our brains create brainwaves, a form of pure energy that is transmitting our thoughts, what we see, and what we feel. Intelligence. When our mortal form dies, the aura that constantly surrounds our bodies leaves. We lose. That's not necessary. It's getting way too scientific here. Intelligent hauntings are essentially the form of a person that you can communicate with in some form. So, like, they're still there. They not only are they making noise or maybe whispering things, you can respond back to them. They can interact with you.
Is this the idea? And like these are first time I've been hearing of these. Are these ghost forms? Which these are people that have come, and they've passed.
Yes.
Okay, so this is not the idea of like kind of the opposite of almost like us without the physical manifestation. Where like there's a theory out there. I think it's in Norway or something. Maybe Sweden, where like they have these ideas that are like there are anti-humans out there, which they're invisible, but they still are like the opposites of us.
We'll get to that too. Okay. That's not this.
Okay, not this.
This is your classic ghost.
Okay,
like,
great.
He's been dead. Nobody's been in that room for 30 years, and like, oh, but I went in there and I talked to this guy. Like, classic ghost, usually due to unfinished business.
Oh yeah, unfinished business.
Unfinished business. Spirit may have suddenly died, and they don't realize that they're dead yet. We hear those kind of ghost stories a lot, where they don't know they're dead, they don't think they're dead, or it's emotionally connected to their loved one, so it doesn't want to pass on and go to the next place. They cannot rest due to some kind of injustice done to them, or maybe they fear the other side or judgment that may come if they cross over. Things like that. The next one up is shadow people.
Gotcha.
Which is basically a type of haunting activity that has no real explanation. They are different from ghosts, but they are something darker.
It's a manifestation similar to mankind, but I don't want to say different plane, but like almost
Something like that.
almost
Yeah.
different dimensional where they are in our interactive world. We just can't necessarily reach them. The closest that we get are these subtle interactions where it's, maybe we do see a glimpse of them, but for the most part they exist in theirs, we exist in ours.
And mostly what you see is going to be more of like a silhouette, hence the name shadow people.
Yep.
You hear about shadow people a lot with sleep paralysis.
Yeah.
If you haven't watched the documentary The Nightmare, it is a good one. Just go into it knowing that it is a documentary with reenactments and not just thinking it's a horror movie.
Right. Made that mistake. Thank God.
Like,
I don't know what's scary.
It's like, this is scary, but in a different way.
This is disturbing, but not what I expected at all.
So that is shadow people. Then there are also portal hauntings, which these are basically the idea of portals being doorways to another world or dimension in which entities can travel through. We haven't really discovered anything about them necessarily. It seems like maybe they can move from different places and things like that. Portals
Conjuring, right?
Yes.
Is Portal?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then there's the one that most sounds like what we're seeing here, which is a residual haunting activity. So these can occur when something traumatic or stressful happens in life. Murder, rape, suicide, anything largely traumatic and stressful. Negative energy is literally blasted into the atmosphere, causing that atmosphere to imprint the events almost like a recording, and then it will play over and over and over again. So the entities involved in residual haunting activities are usually unaware of their surroundings. They are not intelligent. You cannot communicate with them. It's just sort of like watching a tape kind of replay itself.
Wow.
So it's like moments in time that have happened, and you are getting to see them happen.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that all works. What is happening?
I have no idea.
What is happening?
Sorry.
Okay. Anyway, so this happens a lot with negative, but also can be positive. So a lot of people who have ghost stories will say that they say it was at a theater with a ballroom. And it's like the janitor working late at night. Like, this is the classic setup that I'm telling here. And like he's turning everything off, and then he hears like all of this laughing and music and partying upstairs, and he's like, "What? No one's supposed to be here." And then he goes in there, turns on the lights, and there's nobody there.
Yeah.
So it can be negative, but can also be something overwhelmingly positive.
Absolutely.
And these events are just replaying themselves throughout. And the kind of idea of where this came from was really from a British television play that I believe was called The Stone Tape or The Stone Tapes, which basically kind of introduced this thought for the first time. And people have kind of paranormal, enthusiasts have kind of taken it and ran with it, thinking that like, yes, this is a thing that happens.
Huh.
And so like another really kind of popular example of this is what a lot of people would say they would experience at a place like Gettysburg.
Sure.
Where there's tons of stories of seeing a battle or just seeing soldiers marching or, things like that.
Interesting. Which, I mean, I feel like especially what really resonates with me is that like being imprinted on this place where like, if you think about kind of the image that comes to mind, which it's different than what we're talking about.
Sure.
It's not a haunting necessarily, but if you've ever seen the movie What Dreams May Come, when Robin Williams like goes into hell and sees his wife, and she is reliving the day that she finds out that I think he died or his son died, one of the two, and maybe it's the same day. I haven't seen the movie in a while, but like she is reliving that over and over and over, and that's like her daily function, and like he is witnessing her doing that over and over and over.
Yeah.
There's another movie that we watched where they had those cycles, but I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
So
it also reminds me of the scientific theory that I heard a while back that I thought was really interesting. I need to do some more research on it and see if I can find it again. It was a really incredible article, but the gist of it was, I've shared it with you before. It was about sound waves and how like it's this theory that sound waves, which science class, sound waves are vibrations in the air caused if you're speaking, it's caused by your vocal cords, and it comes out. But that those vibrations never die, because it's that idea of like you can't like destroy energy, and like it never dies, it just fades further and further and further and further and further and further. So there's this scientific theory that says if we could create some kind of device that could detect something on that minuscule of a level, that you could almost, it's like auditory time travel.
Interesting.
And so the idea would be that like if you could have some type of equipment, obviously it would have to be extremely sophisticated, because there are so many sounds that happen in 10 minutes, let alone 10,000 years.
Right.
But like, their example was like if we could create something in a way, it's theoretically possible that we could hear, like the 7 year ago speech.
Yeah.
Like we could extract that.
Yeah.
From the ground, essentially.
Interesting.
Because the vibrations are still there. We just can't find them or feel them because they're so slight.
Huh. Interesting.
Theoretically possible. Highly theoretical.
Oh, I'm gonna go ask the biology or Earth and space teacher. Hey, I need a machine.
Might be more of a physics thing, but
Stat.
yeah.
Oh, whatever. Get them involved too.
You guys still do ICP? Integrated chemistry and physics?
Insane clown posse.
I know. I know.
Like, yeah, no, I don't do that anymore.
Bro, they introduced it my senior year. So when was it? I guess it would have been my junior year. I took like Earth space science, and then the next year they didn't offer Earth space science anymore. Instead, they offered integrated chemistry and physics.
Yikes.
But it was the same teacher from Earth space science, and she'd been there forever.
Run it
and
back.
She didn't bother.
Run it back,
It's supposed to be a completely different.
Oh yeah.
Like,
you already got the credit for this. You're getting 2 of them, baby.
that's what I did. I took it again. I got credit for same class twice. It was amazing.
Talk about a scary story.
I got lucky.
Taking this integrated chemistry, whatever you're talking about, that sounds awful.
Oh yeah.
Horror movie right there.
I know. Okay. So anyway, kind of that being said,
Yep.
I think that there are a couple things, maybe multiple things are happening at the Riddle House if these things are real.
Sure.
And, I think a residual haunting makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Especially with the employee that was there.
For sure.
And with Buck as the night watchman, that sounds residual. With some of these other people that we've seen, sounds somewhat residual. But then you have from the construction workers, that does not necessarily sound residual. That sounds almost more poltergeisty.
Oh, for sure.
So maybe things are operating there on multiple levels.
Yeah. Or what was the scroll down on that? There was another one that I thought sounded.
There's the intelligent activity where people are actually like interacting, and then like shadow people, which they talked a little bit about seeing like indiscernible shadows at times
right.
as well.
Like I was gonna say, like almost shadow people, not in the sense of like I feel like shadow people get a lot of like almost like
they're coming for you.
Yeah.
But if shadow people operating almost like a portal where like it's another realm of some sort, and like some dude's walking, he's like, what the fuck, why is my hammer here? And he picks up and moves his hammer, but it's moving your hammer in the real world, and you're like, wait, what the fuck, why is my hammer here? Like it's you kind of get that kind of vibe.
Yeah I don't know, it's interesting. I feel
this is
like
the first time we've delved into anything this deep with ghosts and haunting.
One, I feel like
So,
somebody's
who
gonna
knows?
like hit us up on the comments, and they're gonna be like, "Yeah, you missed this and this and that." Yeah, but we probably did. Like, no idea.
This is the lowest base level of anything we've probably ever done.
Yeah,
and we're just here because we are interested in spooky things.
Yep,
So,
that's it.
Yep.
I feel like it is interesting though to be able to discern some differences, because like that demonic activity, like there. I don't believe that, something like that is
right.
this, I mean, like it
doesn't sound. It doesn't sound like anything as malicious as what demonic activity would be.
Yeah, but especially later, like they do talk about kind of that heightened ramp, but also like one article I found was like, hey, maybe we got some heightened issue because of the disturbance of the house. So like, once we
Right.
kind of started peeling back the boards to move it, like maybe we disturbed.
Expose some things.
Yeah. So I don't know. It could be a mix. It could be a
Yeah.
mix between with Buck being something different than the guy who killed himself being
Mm-hmm.
different than, the lady who's slapping. Like that could easily be a loop. One of these, one of
Yeah,
these situations
residual.
where
Yep.
she is living her reality
Mm-hmm.
every day, and it's the same one where it's like, oh, you're just. When there's somebody there to interact with, you're going to live that loop, or
Yeah.
we're going to witness it, you know?
It's kind of almost like what we see in like the first season of American Horror Story with like the murder house, and like there was a lot of different entities residing there, and a lot of them kind of fit different aspects of these types of hauntings. And then it was sort of like the intelligent ones that could kind of be like, oh yeah, they think that it's still happening and they just do this every day, like, and the intelligent ones could kind of explain that to living people.
Yeah.
And obviously we don't have that in this case, so there's nothing to really say what is or what isn't happening.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting.
Yeah, so that is the Riddle House, and you know what, it's kind of interesting and kind of creepy, but maybe that's just me. For Night Shift Video, I am James, and this guy is,
I'm Cody.
and we're just saying thanks for stopping in.